Welcome to part 6 of our tutorial for the Eternal Lands map editor. In this one we'll be discussing lighting your maps. That is the overall lighting, lighting that comes from particles, light objects that light a specific area, and even 3D objects, how to light them directly. First, let's look at dungeon mode. This is found using the S button at the very top of the editor. And you can press D once you're in that mode to turn the map into a dungeon or not. And by a dungeon, that means, of course, inside. An outside map will, of course, have a skyline and all. So if you press yes, there will be no skyline, just pitch black. You can use the 1, 2, and 3 on the number pad for adjusting the brightness and the color that the overall map has. This is primarily for internal maps, your dungeon maps. You can set the brightness all the way up to 111 for RGB. Or 000 will be your absolute darkest map. And of course, having one higher than the other will change the actual color of the light. For example, if you only set red RGB R to 1 while the other's to 0, it'll be a bright red color. Generally, you're keeping a white, which is keeping each one equal. But there you see a red color to the map. And you get a more yellowish color when you bring in the green. There's a lot you can do with this, but normally, unless you're doing something really strange, you're going to keep it more of a white color. And you will normally only use this on internal dungeon maps because outdoors it can have a very different effect. Using a color where there's an actual skyline and clouds and such. We'll see that in just a moment. As you can see, your average map like Eidolon has 000 and it's not a dungeon map. Now there are exceptions. Actually, this is an internal map. The C1 map will be underground map is not a dungeon, and it's very red. But let's take a look at Isle of the Forgotten instead. As you know, when you go to that map, it's always a dark blue sky, and you can see it's not a dungeon, but it has a very high blue color compared to the RNG, red and green. And that's how that's done. On your internal maps, the brightness can depend on what you're doing. This map here, for example, Irsis Insides, had to have a very high brightness in order for the perception to be high enough to use the ranging arena. This used to be a problem before. I had to increase the brightness in order for it to be used. And the secret dangerous brick secret area was supposed to be very dark and creepy, so I kept the map at 000 as a dungeon, which makes it very dark, the only lighting coming from objects on the map. And here we have Desert Pines Crystal Caves. As you can see here, the colors are sets with a red and a blue that give it a more of a purplish tint. And as well, there's actual light objects throughout the map that it interacts with to make different areas have different colors. As you can see, there's a bluish color and a white and a kind of a tannish color as well. Different areas have different colors. Now, we went over this before, and I'll just do it real quickly. Particles Some particles have light objects connected to them, which work exactly the same as the light objects that I'll be discussing with you in just a moment. But keep those in mind when you're doing your lighting for your maps. It's mostly fire objects that have those. Now let's take a look at the actual light objects. These will be placed on the map, and they tend to be used mostly on inside maps. However, on outside, they'll be used for lighting up at night. If you're on an outside map, you're not going to see these lights during the daytime hours. Now, by default, you're given one that's set at RGB 111, which is a low white light, and it's perfectly fine for all general use. If you need an area to be a bit brighter during the night or inside of a cave, you can just toss one of these in there. And of course, you can delete it with the skull and crossbones button. You can duplicate them using the copy mode. And the colors, as I said, the default's at 111 for RGB. They can actually go up to 5. However, you do not want to go past 3 because it gets a bit too bright and it can have a bad effect on the map. As you can see, I gave the red a higher color there to give it a more pinkish look, along with the 1-in-1 on the GNR. And when you duplicate, you get the exact same color. Again, 3 is the highest you really want to go. Using insert and delete will move the light up and down. And this is important for your shadows and such. You want to keep it high. If there's no specific source for the light, you want to keep it up high in the sky. But if not, if you're going to put it on like a lamp or something, you want to have it directly on the lamp so that your shadows and such will work correctly. Now, a light object will light up an area approximately 30 height tile steps. Of course, it won't be as bright when you're further away from it. Let's put some light objects out and put some lights on them so that you can see how you would set one of these up. If you want to put a lamppost out on the street, for example, you want to put the light where it is coming directly from the top of the lamppost, like so. It doesn't have to be any, very specific because the player can't see the actual light source object. But this will allow any shadows and such to go in the proper direction, and the light will hit things in the proper direction. And you can do this for smaller lanterns as well. If I set this one here on the top of the barrel, we can make a duplicate copy of the light source and move it down so that it's directly on the light. You can notice these at, for example, Nerolic storage. There's a couple of lanterns sitting out that provide the light around storage at night. You want to be very careful with putting out too many lights, because if there's too many, your client has to actually be able to handle all these different lights coming from different directions. And if there's too many of them, it can add to the risk of actually crashing the client. So something like this shouldn't be done. Those are way too close, and they're not actually going to be providing anything. You want to spread them out so that, with a 30 tile range, it's a kind of a circular range, but about a 30 tile range, and you don't need them to have all bunched up. As I said, you don't have to have a actual 3D object source for a light, like a lamp post or such. You can just place them as needed. Like here in Aethelfon in the PK area, there's quite a few random light sources with different colors, and it just adds to the feel of the area at night. And there's green, blue, red lights, and then you can see there's a few particles that have their own lights on top of them as well. You want to be careful doing that. Now let's take a quick look at self-lit 3D objects. In this case, we're going to take a look at these all these quartzes in Nordkarn that you should be very familiar with. If you press Control E, you'll get this details window that shows all the different details for a specific 3D object. And if you look at like the house and such, the self-lit and blended are set at no, which means there is no lighting or anything. We'll look at blended in a moment, but first we're going to be looking at self-lit. And this is a very important one because if an object is self-lit at night on outside or anywhere inside, it's going to be emitting its own light. And you can set that light to be specific color, and the object itself is going to glow in that color. Or not necessarily be glowing, but it will become that color. Or it will mix that color in with its natural color. In this case here, you can see the quartzes are self-lit, and they have a very high 1 RGB. And if you've seen these quartzes at night, you know that they glow pretty brightly. And on top of that, whoever made this map did some overkill by placing actual light sources on top of each quartz, which was completely unnecessary, but I've never bothered changing it because people are used to it that way, and it just adds to the effect of the map, so I'm not concerned about it. Now, you can change. 1 is very bright for the RGB settings. You don't really want to go above that, even though some places you might see it. If you're not pressing any buttons, it'll move it up and down 1 and 0. If you hold Shift down, it'll go up and down by 0.1. Shift and Control 0.001, and Shift and Alt 0.01. You can also use lighting self-lit objects to change the color of the object. In this case, in North Zerotgunda, I've used color to turn these white bricks that you see in the map editor into blue bricks in the client, or bluish bricks. And I did that by setting them to self-lit and changing the colors so that, green and blue are both stronger than red. I also had to self-light the black bricks, even though I was keeping them a blackish color, just so that they fit in better alongside the self-lit white bricks, or blue bricks. In North Gunda, I've actually self-lit a lot of stuff just to give it a whole different feel and effect. Almost everything except for like the rocks and caves and such, is self-lit. And that's because the map itself is set to really dark, as a dark dungeon map, because the castle is on it as well. Finally, I want to show you this little secret from the Taraji Desert Cave. And this is a special little room I made with yellow skull hearts as the ground and so on. And this is taking self-lit objects to an extreme. I created the heart itself with tombstones that are bright red, and then here you see blended skulls. Now the blending basically makes the object transparent. So if you look on the top right at the green, you can see through the skulls to the green. And that's what transparent setting does, or the blended setting, that is. And I set a bright green and a bright yellow. And here I used a 0 self-lit for a pitch black object. As you can see, it makes it look like there's a hole or something at the top. And what that actually is a ranging target. But you would never know that because it's pitch black. And finally, let's take a look at these. This is tile 39, a 3D object from the tiles that is pitch black, and its primary use is to cover up stuff underneath, like rooms and such, that players shouldn't be able to see. In the client, this just shows as a black area. And you just do that to cover up anything that might be going through the ground or something. Anyway, that's an idea of how lighting is done, and next time we're going to start taking a look at the def file for your maps. So, later.